Greetings, Summoners. Cosmic here, and welcome back to another Battle Spirits Saga video. And today we're going to continue our talks of False Gods, or BSS-02, with the white cards, or the, well, they got some cool stuff, and then also, where did these supposed to go? Like, I don't even know, right? So, I'm super excited that Machine Beast really got some cool stuff. You know, white controller, kind of the white late game package, really got some cool stuff. Mechas, if you want to do with Mothership, got a really strong anti-magic style of card that's just going to be able to block off your opponent. And then it got Loki, which is, you know, yes, it's a mecha. Yes, it does some token stuff, but it's really like kind of more ends up being that Turbo Rexy kind of package where it's like you want to play this white balance sound. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that they got that I think plays well into the other three archetypes that we've seen so far out of white. And then there's some stuff that I don't know, like why is this in the set sort of thing. So it could be maybe they're setting up for set 3, right? Maybe there's something else coming that makes more sense, but some of these feel like really great, really strong cards, and others are like, why would you put this in the set? So as we go back to an older video that I talked about in this type of block format where sets like 1 through 4 are all designed with like certain cards in mind, so they keep building on one another, like we talked about in red with Nexus Hazard for Pterosaurs, right? We're probably going to see more of this get built upon in set 3 and set 4, so it's one of those things like, some of these cards might not be the most exciting right now, but probably do something eventually, maybe sort of thing, right? So without any further ado, let's get right into it. Of course, we're going to have our vanillas up front. Not going to waste any time talking about these. Some of them might be cool if the power thresholds end up, you know, checking the boxes. We have Tank Mobile KV2, which is a mecha. So if you want another mecha just to have a high cost, but lots of reduction. It's a 5K for 1 and a 10K for 2 is pretty spicy. You know, out of mechas, like maybe that's something to write home about if you have like the white token spam. Like I think it's a good card for that. But otherwise, you know, kind of whatever for the rest of these cards. Maybe they find a home, maybe they don't. But let's get into the first X-Rare, Trickster Machine God Loki, 6 cost, 2 reduction. I do wish it had another reduction, but that's fine. And when we first saw this card, I thought it was going to go in a completely different direction, if I'm being perfectly honest, right? So we did get this token spam. I shouldn't say spam because it's not as consistent as green, but we did get this like more mid-rangey style of white that has a bunch of tokens which can be turned into value, and that's fine, right? So when destroyed by an opponent, you get a free token out of it, so it's going to replace itself for the cost reduction side, which is, you know, usually something that white can struggle with, so it's nice to fill that role. But really the level 3 is the part to write home about here. So during either attack step, when you or your opponent loses a life, select one of your mecha spirits or nexuses. You may return to your hand and refresh those spirits. So there was some really cheeky stuff that you can do with on-play nexus cards, right? There's going to be some stuff out of green. There's going to be other mecha cards which lets us kind of replay them for value. And then in the future, right, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, we could see other mechas that you want to replay for some value for an on-summon effect. So while this might not be the most exciting card for kind of that mid-range strategy that comes online and the tournament wants to come down, right? Like 2 for 6 isn't the most exciting thing to write about when they can just volcanic break it and then at least you're getting a token back out of it, but you really want this to be for its level 3. However, if you then combine this with things like Turbo Rex, or if you have other Nexus disruptions on maybe your opponent's side, you're now able to dictate a much different flow of the battle step to say like, okay, well now I'm going to threaten bouncing this Nexus, which is allowing me to get extra value, or you're going to have Turbo Rex, which forces their weak guy to attack anyways, right? And that can mess them up with their sequencing. There's a lot of really neat things I think this card can do. So while it might not be the most like, oh my God, it's the strongest, craziest card out of the set sort of thing, I needed to take a second look at this, and I think it's going to end up being a lot better than I thought it was going to be. So I'm really curious to see where this lands. And again, really, really excited to see what we get in future sets, because I think the mecha package is just clearly going to continue to get supported. I mean, I think that's just a well understood, given at this point where it's like, okay, mechas are going to continue to be a thing. They were heavily supported in set 1, heavy support in set 2. I'm sure they're going to be see play in set 3 as well. Going on to even more mechas with our Wing God Mech Grand Wooden. 8 costs, 4 reduction. And this is basically just I hate when people have fun with magic card, right? So I think this is ultimately going to be like a one of maybe in your main decks, but mostly just a sideboard card. because of how strong it can be. So during your opponent's turn, when your opponent uses a magic card from their hand, they must discard a card as an additional cost. So obviously this is something that's going to be insane against Luster. If you stick it on the board, they're going to just cry and scoop on the spot, especially if you can protect it. Because spoiler, this thing is chonky. It is going to be very hard to remove. So that's automatically going to be hitting Luster or kind of the spell-heavy style of decks. During your turn, refresh the spirit when your opponent uses a magic card from their hand. So if they try to do any battle tricks, you just get yourself another blocker. And then on top of that, for only 4 cores and 11k, when one of your spirits is refreshed, this spirit gains 4,000 BP. So important to note that, yes, it does combo very well with the level 2 effect as a given, but we do have some cards that restand themselves, like Enterprise, right? So even if your opponent doesn't, give up magic, you can go a 12k block into a 15k block, right? Or just if there's other cards that you stack up, get multiple refreshing effects. This card can get very, very scary BP-wise for what it wants to be doing. So, yes, I think this is a little bit limited in that you want to mostly play this for where it's going to be an anti-magic style of card. But the level 2 and level 3 are definitely nothing to sneeze at either for what White wants to be doing. And we have some very important cards later on that we're going to talk about with more restanding or, again, just regain, right? Being a very popular card from set 1 can play into this card very well. And it's important to note is that level 3 also doesn't have a restriction on it. So this then is, in theory, also a 15k attacker, right? So if you want to use regain offensively. So definitely a card I think a lot of people are going to be trying out. Definitely a card I'm very scared of as someone who really likes yellow and this kind of just, yellow is always very good at beating up white decks. And now white is getting a card that says, all right, well, your fun time's over. So I'm very curious to see where deck diversity ends up, right? Where yellow can still do very, very well against all these mid-range style of decks, but now might struggle quite greatly against the white control style of decks where, again, that used to be what felt like a very free matchup, right? If you teched correctly. Then we have Thunder God-Mech Donar. So only a 3k for 5 cost 2 reduction, which does feel a little bit bad, but it does have armor red and yellow. So at least you're getting around things like Angelic Pressure and Burning Force. You're still dying to Exhaust Nexus, which can feel pretty bad, but maybe you can get this down early and then sneak it up to level 2. When this spirit attacks or blocks, which is important, select one of your token spirits. You may place all the cores from it onto this spirit to draw 2 cards. So the big mystery that we're going to keep talking about and maybe not say too much about other than more so when we get to green, is that this just says token spirits, period. This is now suddenly a very great enabler for the Ant token style of deck because you have the ramp. You can play this off color pretty easily, and your tokens are going to be going wide, but there is 0 draw that is available to the green deck, right? They got all hand destruction instead. So I think this is just fine for the mecha tokens that we got in set 2, and I definitely feel like this is one of those things like, it's probably just not there for set 2 and then gets support in set 3, which does break my heart a little bit. But I think mecha tokens definitely want a little bit more support to be kind of their own standalone thing. But I do see green-white tokens being a very real threat. And I think this mecha can be a very, very important draw engine for running like that 2-color style of deck. Or again, if you're trying to make the more mono white, obviously splash some other stuff, style of mid-rangey token control style of deck, right? Wherever that paradigm ends up, I think this is just going to be an automatic 4 of because you need the draw, right? That's, again, another thing that white doesn't have a lot of access to. So this card, again, while being not that exciting for its, cost and power thresholds, I think it is absolutely what you're going to want anyways, that you're now being able to threaten, 2 cards drawn every single turn, or if you get enough token spirits, right? Or if you have other cards that can, as a token generator we're going to talk about later, plays very well into this card, right? Now you're just cycling 3 cards every turn, and that's exactly what white wants to be doing because you run out of cards very, very quickly. And of course, up next is what I was just going to talk about was the Gunsmith mime, which again, this is now a mecha, which goes well with Loki. It's a token generator, which goes well with the card we just talked about. So 4 cost 2 reduction when summoned. If the number of spirits you control is equal to or fewer than your opponent, summon 1 mecha token spirit. So this guy is nice that it's automatically going to give you 2 bodies on the board, which of course, if you're trying to stabilize against aggro, can be really important for that. It's also a mecha. The part that breaks my heart is that, yes, it is only a 3k for 3 cores. So this poor boy is dying to just a lot of things. It can be very difficult if you're trying to survive or let him survive so you can bounce him back to your hand with Loki and get more token generators so you can then draw more cards, right? So I think overall this strategy might be a little bit greedy in what it wants to be doing, and that it's just going to be ultimately too slow to set up all of this. But again, I think this is along the lines of what white wanted anyways, because a lot of your threats are going to be, favoring going tall, where you have like a high costed, maybe you have multiple blocks, where now Gunsmith Mime allows us to kind of go wide instead and allows us to have, it might only be 2-3K blockers against, aggro decks, but, still having 2-3K blockers can be quite decent. And then if you do something like Rocket City, they get up to 4K, which is now, suddenly making this look a lot nicer for kind of stabilizing early game against more aggressive strategies. So I think it's just fine at what it wants to be doing. I think this is a card that's going to be kind of stuck in its own strategy of what it wants to be doing, at least early on. But again, a card that, I was kind of, lower on overall, but I've kind of come around to it. And I think I definitely see the potential of where this card wants to be. And then, of course, getting into our Machine Beast style of deck and Merge Mech Lord Mammoth Aegis. Like, this just does it all. This is, if you're playing the Machine Beast deck, you are probably very excited for this card. You are going to be playing a lot of this card. The SPR looks gorgeous. So when summoned, draw a card if you have fewer cards in hand than your opponent. Yep, you're playing white. Almost always going to happen. Place a core from the void into your life if you have less life than your opponent. Yep, you're playing white. It's always going to happen. So this is a card that's very interesting that should almost always be good in getting both effects of this card, especially with a lot of red and purple and even yellow running around. Maybe green is going to play more like the discard package, so that's where maybe they're going one to one, rip one out of your hand sort of thing. So I think green, this can be a little bit lacking, but against all the other colors, right, that are out there, this card is going to just be absolute gas for you. It is a 6K, so it's at least a decent blocker early on. And then if that wasn't just good enough, right, like, that the when summon is very, very exciting for this card. During your opponent's turn, when this spirit is exhausted, select one of your opponent's spirits that costs 5 or fewer and return it to its hand. So I want to be very clear. This is not a when blocks. This is strictly a just when this spirit is exhausted. So you have this on board. Your green opponent is going to try to tap it down because they want to, go for a kill or go wide, and they automatically are going to lose a spirit because of this. So by being able to extend your block in this regard, I think this is going to be a very, very strong card for against green, where a lot of your other threats, unless you have a suppression, of course, right, then some other cards might be better. But in those limited scenarios where you have the suppression or you have like a regain into block again, right, other cards might be better. But I think Aegis is just really going to be able to go the distance if green is going to see a lot of play in the format, or again, just otherwise. 5 hits all curse targets that we care about, so it's also really good against like the Maduke strategies. Like, this card, I think, is just going to be an absolute staple for what we see out of Machine Beast. And also, obviously, got to talk about the high roll of it as well. With the new 0 cost, with the Nexus that we have from set 1, this is now just a very easy turn 2 play that in most cases should draw you a card and heal you a life, right? So I think that also speaks volumes as to where the 0 drops might come online for these different style of white decks. And like Turbo Machine Beast with 0 cost and the Nexus are looking very, very spicy for set 2. So again, one of those things that like I was very, very excited for some of these cards, and I think Aegis really gets us there in what we want to be doing, and really gives me hope that like, oh, the 0 costs are now quite good. Like, this is a very reasonable turn 2 play. And then obviously when you untap, go to 3, and now you're able to block, like even if you get nothing else, right? Now you're able to have 2 very good blocks with this card. It's going to be very solid. I'm definitely really excited with this card and where some of the other 0 drops are going to help boost more of these, mid and late game strategies. Going into some of the other, maybe not the most exciting cards, but is a 6 cost 5 reduction. So again, really, it's not something we see a lot of. It is a Machine Beast, so that's really nice to count for those reductions. So it's one of those things that you're probably going to be doing anyways with this, Turbo Machine Beast style of package. But then the other part of it, right? So armor purple, green, and yellow, a really interesting combination. So again, it does have more of that anti-green where we're not going to be able to get targeted by those tap down effects, and maybe that's where you really want it. But when the spirit blocks, the spirit cannot be destroyed by your opponent's destruction effects during the battle. So again, having more of that curse side, but it only goes up to a 7k. So again, it's going to be just fine against like the purple curse side of things, but you have to have level 2 to save it, which then means it's bad against like the Maduke side of things. The yellow is not going to be all that relevant with the spells we've seen other than like double exhaust nexus, which you're already beating anyways. You're not going to be able to angelic pressure this. Like, I think it's probably just fine for what you want to be doing for like the machine beast, but then doesn't find a home anywhere else. Like, Curiosity kind of already does what we want to be doing with this card and has the added advantage of protecting your mechas. So that's where maybe the conversation becomes like, oh, well, that's more for the mecha deck. And now we have something for the machine beast deck that is doing something similar that we can also play very easily on turn 2 and is going to be a problematic threat for, you know, some of these early game strategies that decks want to be doing. That's probably just fine. Again, this is a card that's like not the most exciting, but it is something that we're able to, you know, get out onto the board pretty cheap, and that's fine. But otherwise, just kind of not that exciting for this card overall. Moving on from there, we have Lion Machine God Superbia. So again, cool that it's a machine beast. This is again a Void Lord. It's a 10 cost with 6 reduction. So obviously, like, you know, the high roll here is like, oh, if you have double, you know, the machine beast nexus, congrats. But it's a very chunky boy. So when summoned at the end of turn, place 3 cores from your trash onto the spirit. So you do automatically get this back as a 10k. It is effectively going to cost 1 because you're going to get your cores back. It does open you up to a when summoned, so that can be a little bit bad for the machine beast into Star Blessed Red, you know, kind of style where it's like you don't want to give them a bunch of card draw. But, you know, we are now saying that, hey, we're going to be able to get a bunch of cores back when we're playing these. So a 10k for 1 effectively, sure, is very, very strong. And then when one of your opponent's spirits is returned to their hand, you may pay 2 cores from this spirit to refresh it. So it is a 1 cost, double blocker, big chunky boy. And then when you lose a life, you can also refresh the spirit for 6 cores. So I like it. Like, it's difficult, right? So you obviously want to be playing this into like some bounce strategies as well, where Machine Beast doesn't have like a notable, right? We're playing like things like Odin, which is always going to get us value, or like Buffalong Bill, or now like our 1 Machine Beast that we just got. So like maybe this combos well enough with Aegis, and like that's the new line for what this Machine Beast God, you know, top deck is going to look like. And you're going to have just double fortress and always get the Christmas miracle land of, you know, not having to worry about your opponent's Nexus removal because spells are getting more competitive in the second set. So maybe that's all fine, right? I think that if we're just talking about a big dumb blocker that you can play early game that's going to cause your opponent some grief and just be bigger than what they want to be playing, yeah, this card is exactly that. And there are going to be some late game turns where you're like, okay, you know, Superbia, get all these cores back, have 10Ks, and now you can play spells, right? Like, yeah, you're putting the cores onto them, but there's still going to be a 7k if you pay those 3 or 6 or 9, however many copies, right, you play onto it, right? So it's something that just has a big body that also gives you access to magic, and that's probably everything you want to be doing anyways on your opponent's turn. Now, yes, the other side of this argument is that you have stuff like Elephant, right, which is going to refresh your cores anyways, and that allows you to refresh your spirits, right? It allows you to be more aggressive. That's where this whole puzzle comes down to, right? It's like, how much of this top end do you really want? Because Elephant is still very good, right? Yes, it's only going to be a 10k, but it's allowing you to be aggressive in these white strategies while also getting all your cores back and refreshing all your spirits, where these type of spirits that we've seen so far in set 2 are like, okay, I might attack with 1, force you to block, and then you're slowly trying to chip away at the board. So it wins a lot slower, right? So maybe we're supposed to go back to Elk. Maybe that's what this all boils down to instead of Elephant, right? Where we're just going to set up a wall and burn our opponent down that way. Who knows? That definitely remains to be seen. But I like what we got, and I like that we hit now. Like, it really feels like we have this all-in Machine Beast style of deck that gives us the payoff for the Nexus. So I think for that side of it, that's absolutely amazing. They did a wonderful job with set 2, where, again, I wasn't that excited for it, but now that I'm seeing more of this line up and plus the magic and the spells, I'm like, okay, I get it. I thought white was going to be the worst, but, you know, it's probably between white or green still, but I think they're a lot better than what I initially had thought. Going on from there, we have the Polaris. 4 cost 2 reduction when the spirit blocks your spirits with a soul core. So again, kind of weird that it says spirits, but it should just be like, you know, whoever has a soul core, they gain 3,000 BP. So I like this for things like, Enterprise, that you can block, sacrifice him because he's very small, right? And then buff something up to 15k if that's what you want to do. Or he's a 6k blocker early on himself. Like, that's fine. We have other mid-range stuff that we want to be doing with balancing. He's a machine beast, but machine beasts, unless you cost 6 or more, don't really count for anything. So this is now we're getting to the cards where I'm like, it's just fine. Probably not much to write home about. Then for a 7 cost, Polar Ice Dragon Glacius. Armored Dragon. If this spirit has a soul core on it, it cannot be selected by effects of your opponent's spirits, and its cores cannot be removed by effects of your opponent's spirits. So again, like a lot of anti-purple stuff, maybe it gets somewhere in the sideboard, maybe it doesn't. And then while this spirit attacks, this spirit cannot be blocked by your opponent's spirit that costs 3 or fewer. Really weird card, in my opinion. Like, I'm not sure where the home was supposed to be for this one. Like, I like the idea that, costs 3 or less, so now you're forcing them to, block with their 5, 6, or 7 costs, and then, wait, this guy's not big enough in some matchups to, be able to attack in freely unless you have, like, a suppression that you're using offensively or some other type of pump. Like, this one was a real head-scratcher for me, and there might be something obvious that I'm missing, so let me know in the comments below if there is, but this feels like a card that wants to be in a deck we don't have yet, right? Like, it's so close to doing something, but then does nothing. Like, obviously, the protection that it has at level 1 and 2 is fine, but I don't think this is where you want to be if you're investing that many cores into something, unless there's some other style of deck coming out that allows us to, attack with this guy and feel good about it. More stuff that's just like, sure, it fits somewhere. Jet Wyvern, Armored Dragon. So again, maybe Armored Dragon matters for set 3. 3 costs, 1 reduction. Armor, purple, white. It's a 4K for 2, which is nice. I guess that's kind of like one of the other things that I'll say. It doesn't get bounced in the mirror. That's cool. Gets around, saves you from deadly balance, things like that. Like, we have Peggy. We have other stuff that we want to play as a 3-drop anyways. So this is going to be one of those things that, like, cool, it's just going to be a meta meta sideboard card, or maybe meta main deck that I'm going to be seeing a lot of white decks or a lot of white aggro, and I just want another blocker that's good against them. Sure. Protects you against Vulcan, things like that, but ultimately, unless Armored Dragon matters at some point in the future, just not something to be excited about. Similarly, Sunk Shane, 6 cost android, so love that we get more typing here. With 2 reduction, when the spirit blocks, place a cord from the void onto the spirit. So we already have this in Glass Bear, and Glass Bear, does have the soul core requirement, but if we're doing something like this, we probably just want Glass Bear anyways because we can play it earlier. Like, nothing about this card gets me excited. Maybe Android matters later. Maybe we're just so hurt for ramp for some reason later on. But ultimately, I mean, like, this is another card that maybe Android matters in the future, and that's why we got it. It's one that just, I don't know why it was printed in the set, sort of thing. So again, if you have better ideas for this card, let me know in the comments, but another one that I think that was just ultimately a skip from me. Oh, I really wish they would have done her justice, but Ice Goddess Frigg, 5 cost, 2 reduction. Both players must pay 1 core for each card drawn when drawing outside of the draw step. So it's a cool tax effect that you can have, but it does impact both players. And the BP thresholds are also just absolutely terrible. So this is a card that I definitely see importance once we get blue, and I think that's going to be really good for shutting down blue's, hyper deck cycling that we should get. And I think that's where she could really shine if it's more of a, meta relevant staple. But, red can just very easily rely on, Volcanic Canyon, right, to get around it and have that as their kind of filter. You can Star Bless it and then just get around it anyways. Like, there's so much that this card just doesn't, it doesn't do anything that we want it to be doing while also penalizing ourselves. Like, this is a card that maybe sees play again for when we get blue, but ultimately is going to be quite a skip, in my opinion. Moving on to our Nexus, the Far-Flung Land, 4 cost 2 reduction. During opponent's attack step, you may destroy this Nexus to give one of your spirits 3,000 BP. So I love this as a early play that can, eventually your opponent's going to have to respect it, right? And attack in. And I love that it gives you the choice of saying, okay, when do we want to use this for reduction versus when is this a on-board battle trick, right? I think this is, of the Flash Nexus, I think this is my favorite one. Maybe the red draw is pretty good because of how well it lines up with the key spirit that you want to be playing for Star Dragons, but I think this one's ultimately going to win it for me. And then during opponent's turn, place a core from the void onto this Nexus when your opponent summons a spirit with a when summon. That's not a once per turn. Like, this is just hilarious against green, right? Like, the amount of shutting down that you're going to do for this, right? Or against yellow and green, right? Like, because yellow wants to play the when summon stuff in the next set too. Like, we're just going to ramp white a billion, and there's nothing we can do about it. Like, yes, 3 cores early on is a very heavy investment, so it is a little bit slower to get online. But like Blessed Cathedral, once you give them a couple of those triggers where they're getting extra cores, or white that's going to have other ways to, you know, get cores and get ramp, or you're attacking them, that 3 suddenly does not become a big deal. So now, yes, the argument becomes like, okay, we ramped a lot. What are we doing with it, sort of thing? But it's really just amusing how much this Nexus can come online quite easily and give your opponent a very difficult time if they're going to be playing a lot of green and yellow. Now, again, with green in their defense, they could just swift a bunch of stuff on your turn so that you don't get the Nexus effect. And maybe that's a lot better. But again, green is going to want to be playing some of these during their combat because the way that green gets benefit from doing so, which we'll talk about during green. So no matter what, you have to give your opponent ramp. And that's going to feel kind of bad, right? So really curious to see where this ends up, but it's a very, very strong Nexus, in my opinion. Moving on from there, the Giant Beast Forest, when destroyed by your opponent, place 2 cores from the void into your reserve. So, like, that's neat that if they want to cut off your, Nexus, now we have the ability to at least get that core back in one way or another. And then during your opponent's main step, when your opponent's effect adds cards to their hand, all your spirits gain 1000 BP. So this is a card that, unless we see more of like opponents getting value for destroying your Nexuses, like we did see King Drago that wants to get the additive effect of like, oh, no matter what, or I think it's Ira, excuse me, that gets the additive effect of like, oh, well, I'm going to destroy one of your Nexus, whether you like it or not. So now we're able to, get some kind of value out of it. But if that's the case, and if you're playing white, just play the Forest to Steel Leaves like anyways, because that's a lot better. You lose out on the 1000 BP side of it, but like you're going to bounce your opponent's stuff. So this is a card I don't think is going to see play whatsoever because there's just other stuff that we want to be doing. Then we have Tranquil Ice Cavern, 5 cost of reduction. During your opponent's attack step, your blocking spirits gain 1000 BP. Meh. Your spirits with the soul core on them cannot be affected by your opponent's spirits with a soul core on them. So weird, like, meta-relevant thing that might come up later, but the high cost, the 1000 BP is nothing to write home about. And then, during either attack step, the soul core thing, like, it's just too limited. Like, this would be really cool if it was in red, and then, like, you could do multiple awakening shenanigans with it, where, like, right, where you're moving the soul core around and making sure you're getting protection with this. But ultimately, at least at the time of recording this and what we have right now, like, the effect's not relevant enough compared to the other cards out of white that we have. So not excited for this yet, but this could be a very strong level 2 effect for what we get later on. Going into the Magic, we then have Reboot Code, which I think is just going to be an insane Magic card. So 7 costs, 4 reduction. When your opponent destroys your spirit for the burst, all of your white spirits gain. When this spirit blocks, the spirit gains 2000 BP during this battle, and then you can activate the Flash effect. And then the Flash, select 3 of your spirits and refresh them. During this turn, your spirits without when the spirit blocks effects cannot attack. But spoiler alert, this is a insane attacker and blocker style of code, right? So if you attack, the burst is going to activate, give all your white spirits the effect, refresh all of them, then attack again. Or if you're on defense, now you maybe like leave up 1 blocker, pop the reboot code, refresh all your guys. Maybe they were trying to set up a go wide turn. And your blocks are going to be much more relevant. And now they're all gaining plus 2000 BP, which then means all your spirits are now going to be bigger than what your opponent wants to be attacking with. I think this card is nuts. The SPR is gorgeous, like all around, just very solid card. I think it's going to be difficult to find the room that we want for it, but something I think that is going to definitely find a home in some of the white strategies. Moving on from there, we have Iceberg, 3 cost to reduction. Select one of your spirits. It gains armor red, purple, green. And then the Flash is to gain 2000 BP. So this is really great if you have some type of all-in strategy that you want to attack for, big value plays. So like it's really good again for Luster because again, red so we don't volcanic break, to deadly balance so they can't break up our combo, and then green so they can't just exhaust it when we restand the Shin, right? So it kind of checks all those boxes, and we naturally have anti-white built into yellow with Ryut or other cards that we want to be doing. So like we have all of it covered, you know, but it's during the main phase, so we only get to do this once. So it has to be for like all the value in the world, where it's like quad exhaust nexus into dream bomb into all this other stuff, like, right, to get the most value, or otherwise I just think it doesn't make the cut. So I think Luster, you know, ultimately is not going to want this, because you're just able to play things like Enterprise, and you're able to get value out of Clavis now, who's going to recycle some of those exhaust nexus, so you get value that way. But I could see this being a very, very solid sideboard card for a lot of different decks, ultimately, because you are gaining both that armor red and purple. And then the nightmare of the set, Infinity Shield, 4 cost, 2 reduction. Select one of your Machine Beast or Mecha Spirits. That spirit can block while exhausted during this turn. Because we needed more answers, or more things Axe Spider could be doing without getting any more answers, right? So Infinity Shield is just absolutely insane with Axe Spider. It's just suppression without having to use the Soul Core. It costs 2. The dude, this is just Ice Shield, you know, 5 through 8, as we say, or, you know, again, thanks to suppression. Now it's what, 9 through 12? Like, whoo, this card is just doing so much. Get your foils. It's going to be cracked. I don't know what more you need to say about that. It's insane for the Axe Spider deck. I will also say, of course, because the Machine Beast and Aegis is great for the anti-green, that now if they tap down your guy, you block something, and now you still want to have a 10k blocker, like Infinity Shield allows you to do that, but at the same time, like, suppression is just probably what you want anyway. So, meh. Kind of like, you know, not that big of a deal if you're already running suppression and you're not playing an all-in style of deck like Axe Spider. And then lastly, we have the Inescapable Avalanche, 4 cost, 2 reduction. Return one of your opponent's attacking spirits to their hand. So just a great bounce effect. You know, obviously we have the argument for this versus Dream Bomb, where Dream Bomb, if you let them hit you, is also going to hit a Nexus. Dream Bomb allows you to bounce something else, right? So one of the key values of Dream Bomb is your opponent attacks with a spirit, they try to leave a blocker up, and then you go, sorry, Dream Bomb, your blocker, goes back to your hand, and now I'm swinging for game, where this card doesn't do that, right? So I think a lot of people are really scared with this initially, because it's like, oh my god, it's just better than Dream Bomb. But I think you're still playing Dream Bomb anyways, but in that more tempo strategy of what, you know, like that mid-game that White wants to be doing, I think this is a very good card for like your Odins and for your Turbo Rex and stuff like that. So I think it could be very, very good for what that wants to be doing. And of course, obviously combos very well with Turbo Rex. So what is your favorite card from White? And this one was actually hard for me. Like, I wanted to say Reboot Code, but I think I just ended up picking Loki here, because I think as we get more sets, the level 3 effect is going to be just like absolutely bonkers. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what brews people come up with for Loki in set 2. Again, I won't be starting with White. I'm going to be starting with green, just because, you know, for the channel and what I'm most interested in. But I think Loki is going to be kind of scary. Like, I'm really looking forward to where this card lands. So with that, that is going to wrap up our White set review for Battle Spirits Set 2 False Gods. Of course, we're still going to be getting to the other ones. There's just been a lot of stuff that I can't talk about yet that I've been very, very busy with offline for Battle Spirits Saga. So I've been doing a lot of kind of groundwork for other stuff that's been happening. All that will be revealed soon. But I'm still very excited for Set 2. And I will probably do like a case opening or box opening or something, just to kind of spread the love and get excited for the set. So with that, my friends, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Stay safe, stay hydrated, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.